saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
just
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting, letting attendees to filter in to the room here, the virtual room. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Committee of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. I'd like to call this meeting to order and invite our clerk, Jessica Lee, to take care of some housekeeping items for public comment and such.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, just a few reminders before we get started. In case you didn't hear, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on SACOG's website under the Agendas tab for board and committees. Additionally, all presentation slides will be posted on the same webpage. For any members of the public tuning in today and who wish to make a public comment, you can notify us by selecting raise hand or by pressing *9. And if you're calling by phone, you'll press *9. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes each, and you are also welcome to email in your public comment request as well. For our committee members, please remain on mute until you're ready to speak, as this will help eliminate any background noise. And please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're phoning in to alert the chair when you have a comment to make.
Great, thank you very much. Can we go to the Pledge of Allegiance? Can we get the flag up on the screen, please? And if you all rise and join me in the pledge. Hand over heart, ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Jessica, can we do the roll call, please?
Yes, directors, please prepare to answer when I call your name. Director Bradford?
Here.
Thank you. Branscombe? Absent. Desmond?
Here.
Guerrero?
Present.
Jennings? Absent. Joyner?
Here.
Saylor?
Here.
Absent. Oh,
Here.
Thank you very much. Chenier? Absent. Vice Chair Sander?
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Spokley?
Here.
Chair Soon?
Here.
Ex officio member Benapal? Absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Or excuse me, we'll go to public communications. Are there any folks who'd like to speak on items not on the agenda this morning? Not on the agenda. I don't see any hands raised. Do you see anything, Jessica?
No public comment.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move to the agenda. Just for everyone's information, we're going to take the action items ahead of the consent items this morning because we have the expiration of the governor's executive order, and this first item will address this issue in terms of virtual meetings. So item 1 is remote committee meetings, and Lynette Espinoza, good morning.
Good morning, committee members. Lynette Espinoza, your clerk to the board here with an item regarding remote committee meetings. As you may be aware, the governor's executive order that made changes to the Brown Act to allow for remote online meetings and waived certain posting requirements expired on September 30th. Legislation AB 361 was signed by the governor in September, and that makes provisions for continued flexibility for public meetings. AB 361 allows SACOG to continue to hold remote online meetings as long as there is a governor-issued state of emergency and that each legislative body, SACOG committees and the board, make a determination by resolution that state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. SACOG plans to continue meeting remotely as long as Sacramento County recommends physical distancing, and staff will continue to review this recommendation, that this recommendation is still in place in advance of each meeting. This item is the first item on today's agenda, as the resolution in your packet authorizes this meeting to be held remotely. The resolution will also provide for the December 2nd committee meeting to be held remotely, since that's occurring within 30 days of this authorizing resolution. When a meeting is held that's outside the initial 30-day timeline, a new resolution reconsidering the circumstances of the state of emergency will need to be authorized by the committee. So this morning, staff is recommending approval of the resolution, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Move to approve.
Second, Joyner.
Thank you, Lynette. Okay, we have a motion to second. Thank you. Before we do that, I want to go out to if there's any comment from folks out in the public. Okay, seeing none, come back. I heard a motion from, was it Director Guerrero? Who?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then a second from Director Joyner, I believe. If there's no other comments on this item, Jessica, can you do the roll call vote, please?
Yes. Director Bradford?
Aye.
Thank you. Branscombe? Absent. Desmond?
Aye.
Guerrero?
Aye.
Jennings? Absent. Joyner?
Aye.
Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier? Absent. Vice Chair Sander? Vice Chair Sander? Looks like we lost him. Vice Chair Spokley?
Yes.
Chair Soon.
Aye,
Thank you. Give me one moment.
sure.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, the approve the Federal Transit Administration American Rescue Plan Act stimulus funding of the 12% discretionary share programming for the SACOG region. Barbara Von Bechtold, good morning.
Good morning, committee members.
You're
my
not
name is
Barbara?
Michael Rawson. I'm not Barbara.
Hi, Michael, yeah. All right.
But I am presenting the staff report on her behalf.
Okay. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. This staff item is to approve the Federal Transit Administration American Rescue Plan Act stimulus funding of the 12% discretionary share program for the SACOG region. And we have a PowerPoint to present, but before we get into the PowerPoint, I want to give just a brief background of this program, of this funding program. Since the COVID, the providers in the Sacramento region and across the country have seen significant decrease in revenue, while continuing to incur unplanned costs for health and safety. On March of this year, March 11th of this year, the ARP Act was signed into law, with the FTA allocating $30.5 billion to recipients of urbanized area and rural areas for formative funds. For the Sacramento region, the ARPA transit funding includes approximately $118 million for the Sacramento UZA, which is providing your attachment A. Caltrans will be administering the rural area funds in partnership with SACOG at a later date. The American Rescue Plan Act funds are for the payroll and operations of public transit, and those funds, the operation funds of that includes payroll and expenses of private providers of public transportation. It's also to help assist with any capital projects if the recipient certifies that they have not furloughed any employees during the pandemic. The capital operating expenses for all of the FTA section 5307, the 5310, and the 5311 recipients, including those in our large urban areas, and including administrative leave for transit workers are included within that act. On the funding is provided at a 100% federal share where there's no local match required. And at this time, I will have Robert to pull up the PowerPoint for us, please. Thank you. I stated before, SACOG staff is recommending an allocation of the 12% discretionary share of the American Rescue Plan Act stimulus funds, which is $9,188,374. Our recommendations are based on discussions with our Sacramento UZA operators and direction from the SACOG board to assist our regional transit operators towards implementation of the board-approved next generation transit strategies that improve regional transit services sooner rather than later. Next slide, please. The ARP, excuse me. Sorry about that. The ARPA transit stimulus funds are made up of the FTA 5307 urbanized funds. All of the projects regularly eligible for the 5307 can use the ARPA FTA 5307 funds. And as explained earlier, with those funds, one of the requirements is that the operators would need to not have furloughed any of their employees in order to use that funding for capital projects. SACOG allocated the 88% of ARPA funds to regional operators using our earn share method that was approved by the board in June of 2021. Next slide, please. This pie chart shows the FTA 5307 funding for both the Sacramento UZA and the small UZAs within our region. This is the ARPA stimulus allocations. And Sacramento region was approved for $117,799,677 in ARPA funds for the Sacramento UZA. There was additional $2,444,637 of ARPA funds going to the small UZA operators. And that's what makes up the total stimulus funds of $120,244,304. As you look at this pie chart here, you see the breakdown of all of the allocation to our transit operators, as well as our nonprofit and small UZA operators within Sacramento region. Next slide, please. The ARPA discretionary share is 12% of the 5307 derived portion of the appointment of the $76,569,784, which allocates $9,188,374. This funding was set aside to assist our Sacramento UZA operators towards implementing their near-term next generation transit strategies. As one of the strategies within the next generation transit was to speed up transit, provide viable options for our travelers. Staff and the operators agreed to a hybrid approach for the ARPA discretionary share. That design is to address the current recovery needs of the regional transit operators, as well as regional planning to aid the advancement of the transit system as the region emerges from the pandemic. Based on the previous board directions, SACOG plans to work with the regional operators to move away from the earn share performance-based methodology towards a more discretionary approach to allocating the transit funds. Since April of 2020, the stimulus funds going to Sacramento UZA operators will be approximately $28,526,262. Some of that going to the small UZA operators, which are in the Davis Marysville, and Woodland UZAs. Next slide, please. Thank you. As part of what we discussed with our board was we can utilize some of these funds in order to implement some of the next generation strategy within our region. So the listed projects are directed towards that goal in order for us to start implementing some of those next generation strategies. So this discretionary share projects that you see before you list the some of those. There's $100 million that staff is recommending to go towards SACOG's Regional Transit Network Capacity, Speed, and Reliability Investment Plan. And $1,750,000 to go towards Paratransit Inc. Community-Based Transportation Service Assistance, as well as $2 million to go towards CCJPA third track project between Sacramento and Roseville. These projects are to benefit the regional based coordination with our mega region partners, as well as begin facilitating towards a seamless transit system within our region. Next slide, please. This pie chart shows the full transit stimulus funds that incorporates funds for the 5307 emergency stimulus package that came through. So the full amount that you see before you on the pie chart is $301,325,490. As you can see from the previous pie chart that we had, staff broke out to show the detailed amount of how much funding is allocated to our transit operators, as well as our nonprofit community-based operators that we partner with as well within our region. Excuse me. The only stimulus funds remaining on the allocated are the ARPA discretionary share funds, which is the $9,188,374. Our plan is to, as I stated earlier, our plan is to have that $1 million planning project amounts, which is to facilitate our planning direction for the region. 85% of the ARPA funds are portioned to the Sacramento UZA, and there's 33% of the total transit stimulus funds, as you see before you, is a portion to the SACOG UZAs. All of the ARPA funds must be in an approved FTA grant by September 30th, 2024, and be expended by September 30th, 2029. The ARPA and all of the transit stimulus funds are 100% federally funded, as mentioned before. And when we're talking about the discretionary share projects here, if there's any allocation that's left over from those discretionary projects, those funds will go back to the earned share recipients. So they will be able to utilize those funds if they are not being totally expended with the discretionary share projects that we listed previously. And this morning, our staff recommendation is for the committee to approve the project items and to move forward for board consideration and action. Thank you, and staff turns it over for any questions.
All right, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the directors? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go out to public comment. I know I see a hand up, but I also received an email from YOLO Transit,
Yeah.
Transportation District. Autumn Bernstein.
Chairson, would you like me to allow Autumn Bernstein to talk?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right, Autumn, you are unmuted.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Autumn Bernstein with Yolo County Transportation District. I'm speaking up this morning to support staff's recommendation in terms of the allocation of the discretionary share to fund these 3 regional priorities. We're very supportive of the regional express bus study. I think this is a really critical priority for Yolo County because so much of our workforce increasingly does not live within Yolo County, and congestion on the causeway is such a huge concern for us and our residents that finding ways to get more people across the causeway to job centers in Yolo County is a huge priority for us. And we think the regional express bus study is something that will allow that to happen. It's something that we can't do on our own. And we believe SACOG is the right entity to bring together us in partnership with the other transit operators to make that happen. And you may be wondering why we would be supportive of a 3rd rail project between Sacramento and Roseville, which doesn't even impact, which is not in our county. But the reason I think this is important is, again, because the congestion considerations are so significant on the causeway. And increasingly, we know that a lot of that congestion is interregional trips between the Sacramento region and the Bay Area, and finding out ways, again, to move more people quickly on transit through Yolo County is a priority for us, as we really are the bottleneck in the middle of the Bay Area, between the Bay Area and the Sacramento region. So we think that project will have significant benefits, again, for relieving congestion and reducing VMT that we experience here in Yolo County. And then lastly, the allocation for paratransit. We know that our most vulnerable populations are continuing to be impacted by the pandemic. And so making sure that we have safe and reliable travel options for elderly, disabled, and wheelchair dependent people is an important priority for the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Next commenter we have is Tiffany Fink from Paratransit. Good morning, Tiffany.
Good morning. Thank you for Chair Soon and committee for having us today. I want to speak in favor of this, and I want to thank you on behalf of Paratransit for considering this. Paratransit is unique in that we don't take an earned share allocation. We've always gone through the discretionary, largely because our programs are regionally focused. And so we're very appreciative of the consideration here. This will allow us to keep programs like Moving Youth to Jobs, which has been primarily in Sacramento County, and we've started to do within the 6-county region. Moving forward, it's also critically important for us to be able to support our human service program providers. In 2019, 2/3 of all ADA type trips were actually taken off network through the assistance we provide to human service transportation, making the service much more economical, but also it's a better service that can meet the needs beyond what public transportation can provide, meaning more people get more rides. Additionally, I serve as the Transit Coordinating Committee Chair this year, and so I'd like to say that the committee is excited to work with the board about Next Gen Transit. And while we are very supportive of the planning money, we do think for the consideration for operating, FTA right now is really putting a focus on retaining workforce. It's something that's a big issue in transportation, and this will allow us to keep that stability, which I think is important to public trust and confidence in the systems we have now. And I believe one of the quickest ways to be able to roll out a next gen system is making sure we have a stable, reliable, invested system to build from, because it's always easier to build forward than to try and repair through growth. So I believe this approach allows us to move quickly. It also, based on cap to cap last week, allows us to take advantage of some of the incentives FTA is putting out for quick utilization by operators of these funds. They're actually making additional pots of revenue available to agencies who are able to deploy this, which could hopefully lead to additional funding for Next Gen to come to this region as we use this funds. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for those comments as well. We have another commenter in the audience, Rob Paget. Can we let Rob in?
Hi, good morning. This is Rob Paget. I'm the Managing Director for Capital Corridor. I want to thank you this morning for your consideration of your support for the Sacramento to Roseville third track project. We just received the good news that this project is included in with a $30 million proposed funding level within the ITIP, California ITIP program, We are also actively seeking federal funds through the CRISI program, which is a rail discretionary program. Your support for this project will certainly show that the project has great local support. We know that this is a foundational investment that is going to result in very significant improvements to our rail service out into the Sacramento suburbs. And as was mentioned by Autumn and Davis, we actually have a lot of travel that goes from Placer County into Sacramento, but also down to the Davis and Fairfield-Vacaville area. We think that with these improvements in service, we will be a big part of improving our mobility in the Sacramento region. So with that, I will close. But again, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Paget. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to make a comment? Not seeing any hands raised at this time. Okay, seeing no further comments from our attendees, I'm going to bring it back to our directors. Are there any comments from our directors?
If not, Joyner moves approval.
Okay.
Desmond seconds.
We have a motion from Director Joyner, a second from Director Desmond. Roll call vote, please, Jessica.
Please prepare to indicate your vote when I call your name. Director Bradford.
Aye.
Thank you. Branscombe. Absent. Desmond.
Aye.
Guerrero.
Aye.
Jennings. Absent. Joyner. Thank you. Saylor.
Aye.
Chenier. Absent. Vice Chair Sander.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Spokley.
Yes.
And Chair Soon.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right, very good.
Do you mind if I just make a quick comment on that?
Yeah.
Question?
Please do.
This comes off from some of you that joined a Cap to Cap virtual trip last week, and I believe maybe even some of you who joined the Placer Business Alliance the week before that. As I put in my update to the board, while it was not ideal to be doing virtual visits last week, the timing was ideal, and frankly, the message was too. And things like the mega region effort and the fact that 4 of the SACOG board members, as you know, are joining with 4 of the Bay Area MTC members and 4 San Joaquin County, that we have done the groundwork, that we have prioritized, that we have a short list, including third track to Roseville, just makes a tremendous difference between that and Green Means Go, and a lot of the other, as I put in my update to you yesterday, those are exactly the kinds of things I think we need to put money down. Talk is cheap, and so I know for many folks we work with, we appreciate that small but really important leverage support on projects like that. And final, I know you all know this, but we talk about it, and I think Autumn Bernstein made this point. We talk about it as a Sacramento to Roseville as if it's just going to serve that segment. That is the project, but the corridor is a mega regional corridor, and that corridor eventually, and already really the commute shed, right, and the economic mega region extends to Reno Sparks. So I just want to put that in context, and we're delighted to be able to obviously help our transit operators on some of that earned share. But that project in particular, you didn't get a lot of discussion about it, but you heard some public comment, is just, it's vital to the economic future of the region. And I'm very happy that you all have been able to do that in terms of putting some support down. As small as that is, it's going to make a big difference.
Yep. Thank you very much, James. I wholeheartedly agree. I'm glad we were able to make some additional investments in those areas. All right, when we move on to our consent calendar, we have a few items here on consent. And if there's any, I'm going to ask the audience if there's any comment on our consent items. I don't see anyone wishing to comment on consent. Bring it back to our directors.
Approval of consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Spokley.
Saylor seconds.
And second from Director Saylor. Get a roll call vote, please, Jessica.
Directors Bradford.
Aye.
Thank you. Branscombe? Absent. Desmond?
Aye.
Guerrero?
Aye.
Jennings? Absent. Joyner?
Aye.
Sailor?
Aye.
Chenier? Absent. Vice Chair Sander?
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Spokely?
Yes.
And Chair Soon?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right. Well, moving on to our informational items. Item 5, selection and kickoff of the Sacramento Regional Emergency Preparedness Strategy. Mr. Rosan.
Yes, hello again.
Yeah.
Um, I have our consultant WSP online as well, and at the end I will turn it over to them so they can introduce their management team and provide a dialogue of their initiatives for the strategy. This item here is providing an update on the selection as well as the kickoff of the Sacramento Regional Emergency Preparedness Strategy Plan. And as we know, this has been a long process on getting this started, for our region, and we all see that this is a very important initiative for not only the Sacramento region but our mega region area. Especially recently, we have seen the fires that we normally see up in the mountain areas that not really affecting our region, but lately they've been more closer to home. So we would like to thank our Caltrans partner for approving and providing the funding for this project to continue to look and expand and highlight areas of our regional emergency preparedness plan for the 6-county region. Part of this plan with the assistance of our consultant WSP and the SACOG staff, we will collaborate with our partners, our local emergency office, as well as Caltrans Emergency Operations Office, and the stakeholders in other jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions already begin working on their emergency preparedness plan. During this process, we will work with them in order to look at what their plans have already incorporated, and seeing how we can expand on that and make that broader within our region. Other works of this plan will also include looking at more of the corridor areas and seeing how what benefits or what negative impacts that may occur with if we need to do mass evacuation processes. Along the lines of that, there's going to be coordination with our private businesses as well as the medical center. That's one area that during these type of emergency processes, it's kind of like forgotten about that we need to include the medical centers. There are special needs that may come up due to the fact that you have people with disabilities. You have situations where they are in gurneys or in beds. How do we ensure that population is safe? So this plan here will take all of that into consideration, and we will continue to engage the committee and the board as we go through drafting up the strategies for our Sacramento region, and the outcome that we're looking to have is to also create a advisory group that will be emergency advisory group that will be made up of our regional partners, as well as our local and state emergency centers, our first responders, so that we can continue to move forward and continue to have this dialogue, so we are always prepared for any type of emergency situations that may come up within Sacramento region. And at this time, I will turn it over to our consultant WSP and Tim, and he can introduce his team.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, all. Thanks for having us on. As Mike mentioned, I'm with WSP. I'm a resilience planner here, and I'm the project manager for this effort on the consultant side. I'm joined by Annika Ragsdale as well, who's on camera. So wanted to thank you all for this opportunity. We're looking forward to diving in. I think some of the key themes and objectives we've heard for this particular strategy are really establishing better coordination and preparedness on a regional level. So complementing rather than duplicating what's already happened at the county and city levels. And then really determining how transit agencies can be involved with preparedness and evacuation efforts. In addition to that, really establishing recommendations for how all the investment that's going to happen over the coming decade or so in the region, particularly in technology like ZEV buses, can help better prepare the region for flooding and fires. So we try to put a team together that pulls from all the relevant disciplines here, folks who focus on emergency management for transportation and transit agencies in particular, folks with transit operations experience, including during disaster events, resilience planning and analytics, and then a bunch of technical experts for items like ZEV fleets and infrastructure. We also teamed up with VRPA, who's a DBE firm from the Central Valley that will help with the community and stakeholder engagement on this. So again, we're looking forward to getting started on this one and wanted to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Tim. Michael, do you have any more part of your presentation?
No, thank you. No, thank you,
Okay.
Carrie. And yes, at this time, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the directors? Okay, seeing none at this time, I'm going to go out to our attendees in the audience. Are there any comments or questions from the attendees? And I don't see any hands raised from our attendees. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. And Tim, I wanted to just to confirm, I see in there you're utilizing the SIMS NIMS process, which is great, and not trying to recreate things. You'll will be outreaching, of course, to the sheriff's departments and that are locally responsible for evacuations in those communities, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's going to be a huge stakeholder coordination here, especially to OESs and sheriff's departments, and including and then the transportation agencies as well is going to be a huge theme throughout all of this. So it's going to be very coordination heavy, I think.
And I'm sure as Director Desmond would know, that Highway Patrol, of course, would be part of that, I would assume.
Yes.
Assume too. Thank you, Chair Soon.
Sure. Okay, no, I'm excited to see this happen. It's really really important for our region to be coordinated. So very happy to see this go forward. If there's no further any questions or further comments from the directors, I'd entertain a motion at this time. Oh, this is for information. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot. Great. All right. We'll move on to our next item. Item 6, our 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy Update. Benu, good morning. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, no, I couldn't hear.
Good morning.
There you go. Yeah, good morning.
So before I start, I would like to give it over to James so that he can say a few words and then I can go over my presentation.
Okay, fantastic.
Great, thanks, Banu, and again, good morning. We had a good discussion at the Strategic Planning Committee that some of you are a part of to kick this off. And I don't know if you had a chance, but I also just would recommend even after this morning to take a look at Sunny Wright McPeak's presentation around the triple bottom line, because I actually thought it was a great presentation, a really good discussion. We kick off every MTP SES and we think about areas in which we can focus. And we think about a framework in which to sort of hang what we're trying to accomplish in a plan. This gets all the way back to when I first started at SACOG and people used to ask me, you know, what's the elevator pitch for SACOG, or what are your top 3 things you're working on? And it took me a while. It took me a couple of years to actually be able to hone that. And with the board and through a series of retreats, you know, we got our sort of public facing work plan to 10 goals and down to 3 goals. And that's really exactly what we're trying to do with this framework. So Banu's going to walk through, as she's done with you in previous months, but I think with a sharper focus to this morning on why we think this triple bottom line is an excellent focus. The 3 E's, and the memo states this, and Banu might cover it. It's had quite a bit of history. I was around this framework with Sunny Wright McPeak when she was the Bay Area Council in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it really elevates equity, economy, and environment as a triple bottom line framework. It is not about trying to basically always pick trade-offs among those 3s. We're trying to maximize them all. I think it's an excellent way for us to be a little bit more intentional on our environment E and perhaps to expand that. Obviously, we have a greenhouse gas target, as you all have been well schooled by this point, but it is also about environmental health, and it's about resilience and disaster preparedness, as you just heard in the previous item. And this also allows us to take the 3rd E of equity and really elevate this as well, pull in a lot of the work that the board has been doing over the last 18 months or so around equity, and give us something that provides a focus. I'm sure you may have some questions this morning about, well, you know, where does safety fit? Where does state of good repair fit? Where we can. And of course, we will be looking at these things. We actually have a lot of federal planning factors that we have to incorporate into any plan. But as we tee this up, I would just have you think about, it is always helpful to provide focus. And we think this triple bottom line actually is the perfect framing for this time, this moment we're in. And it provides a lot of benefits. It allows us to ask questions, which I think, again, is what you're going to hear a little bit from Banu this morning as we go forward. And it frankly allows us to prepare ourselves as a region to get ready to compete, back to cap from last week. We heard this a lot in my meetings. What does your project do for disaster preparedness and climate resilience? What does your project do for equity and to reduce disparities? So we don't want to fill in, we don't want to check boxes on those questions. We want to have legitimate, genuine things we can point to. So that's my tee up, Banu. Back to you.
Thanks, James. That's perfect. Thank you. So good morning again. I just want to say that the item that I'm going to discuss today is included in your packet as attachment B. And as James mentioned, this is the triple bottom line approach to how to answering some of the questions that we typically answer in our MTP SES. So what I would like to do today is to facilitate a conversation on what your thoughts are, how do you like it, or what are some of the aspects that we can explore using the triple bottom line approach. So as James mentioned, the 3 goals of this triple bottom line is equity, economy, and environment. But what does it mean in the context of MTP and how we could use this to answer some of our questions that we typically answer in our MTP? So that's the main focus that I would like to bring it. And I would also like to add that the staff will be using any information, any ideas, any feedback, any constructive, anything that you provide us today to shape the policy framework that we will be bringing to you for adoption in February of 2022. With that, let me share my screen. Give me 1 second. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Right, perfect. Thank you. So as a first step, I just want to go over what does each of the goal means. So staff has drafted a goal statement, which is in a very draft form. And I would like to start with the equity statement. I know it's a lot of words for a PowerPoint, so I'll just give it a minute so that you can read it and observe it before we have a conversation. So the staff has talked about equity as a just and inclusive region where investments are being made in historically marginalized communities. So race can no longer be used to predict health or economic outcomes, and outcomes for lower income residents are improved. So how does this statement translate into questions for the plan? An example of a question would be, how can MTPACS help reduce racial disparities or income disparities in transportation and housing? And I just want to make sure that we all are on the same page to understand the fact that we don't have the answers. Staff doesn't have the answers. This is just a way to facilitate and to help us think on what are some of the possible ways we could look for answers. And an example of an indicator for measuring this goal could be, how can we increase the transportation investments in areas of high concentration of minority? Or it could be improved safety in communities of concern. Another way to look at it is perhaps increase the transit access to essential destinations like schools and hospitals for disadvantaged communities. Perhaps it is to provide more mobility choices. Or if you are looking at it from a housing or a land use standpoint, maybe it is by increasing the percentage of small lot or attached housing in high opportunity areas. So these are some examples of how we could be looking at. A lot of them we already answer in a lot of our MTP, but we want to bring a more focus onto the equity aspect. Moving on to the next goal, economy. Again, I will give it a minute so that you can read it and observe it before we have before I go on. So economy, the way we have drafted it is a diversified regional economy built on the expansion of key economic clusters, including agriculture and food, health science, and innovative mobility. An inclusive economy in which all the people have access to resources that give them the opportunity to realize their full potential. Again, how do we answer this question, or what are the right questions to ask? An example of a question can be, how can we in MTP prioritize infrastructure investments and growth patterns that support the region's key economic clusters? Just so that to give a context to the pictures that I'm putting here, this is the AgStart in Woodland, which is a lab space for research and development to support our agricultural economy. It was part of our economic prosperity plan developed by the Regional Prosperity Partnership. Again, another question could be, what investments does a region need to make or improve our competitive standing among peer regions across the country looking to grow, attract, and retain a talented workforce? Or perhaps it could be, how can we better facilitate connected communities so that business owners and residents have better access and opportunities to thrive? Now on to my third E, the environment, which you don't need any introduction because we deal with it in every MTP. A safe and resilient region for all residents where natural resources and air quality are sustainably managed so people can thrive here for generations. That's our draft goal statement. To answer those questions or to address that, how can MTPACS transportation investments and strategic growth planning reduce carbon emissions in the region? Or how can the MTP prioritize infrastructure investments and growth patterns that will help make the region more resilient in the face of climate change? Again, to provide a little context, this is the Ice House Lake. Both drought and fire are major concern because forest management and water are major issues here. So it's a very relevant question for addressing these kind of issues. Or it could be, how can the MTPACS help reduce or mitigate harmful tailpipe emissions and other automobile-related pollutants that negatively contribute to health, such as asthma, heart disease, or lung disease? So these are typical examples of questions that we would endeavor to answer using this plan process with the 3 E goals. And with this, I would like to open it up for discussion. And I just want to reiterate that we are looking for any feedback or ideas or anything that we can use to shape the full policy framework in time for the February adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Binu. Very lofty objectives there, but worthwhile for sure. Are there any questions for the directors? From the directors, excuse me. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask our attendees in the audience, are there any comments or questions from the attendees? I don't see any hands raised.
No public comment.
Okay, or no public comment. Okay, thanks, Jessica. If there's no further comments or questions from the directors, we'll go ahead and close this out. Oh, Director Saylor, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to briefly mention that I think this is an entirely appropriate path for us to launch this upcoming MTP SCS. And given James's opening comments about the conversations we had last week with the cap-to-cap teams, this is right on target. This is a very appropriate construct for us to begin. This framework is going to work for us and will resonate with our state and federal partners as we move forward. So thank you very much. Very thoughtful presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saylor. Director Guerrero.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is my first time here in the Transportation Committee. I want to share that, in West Sacramento, just in our city alone, we have a group where they had access to recreational activities, and then those got switched over to a larger venue in the high school area. And it was thought that, it would be accessible, but over the years we learned that transportation has been a barrier for them. They don't have transportation. So in thinking about, I think equity or access, I'd like to also include for youth, something that is appropriate, something that helps them independently to access recreational activities. Sometimes, in the older communities, we have a hard time being able to provide, any development agreements or any new housing funding in that area. So it really comes out of our general fund, and it takes longer to build in recreational activities. So whatever we can do to increase, which, Yola County Transit has free transportation, except it's far and few between. It's not at a convenient time. Something more dedicated for youth, which we have VIA at this point, but it's still through VIA, they have to pay for it. And even our youth programs are saying they have to purchase vehicles in order to, pick up the youth and then take them home. They can't rely on their family members. And listening to a past presentation in the board of directors, families that with low wages just have one vehicle, and that's what they're going to use to go to work. So just thinking about all of that, and thinking about, our challenging situation under COVID, the crime rate going up, and it really directly impacting those areas that are pleading for additional support for the youth, and maybe just kind of, I don't know how you inject that in here, but I think that would be helpful to include, that elevated concern that I'm seeing.
Thank you, Director Guerrero. As I process this, that we all know there are the governmental requirements, right, for meeting the MTP and SCS, and but as you consider the 3 E's, isn't it just about making our world better? A better environment, where, as Banu mentioned earlier, where any disparities that are happening is nothing to do with race, and everybody is able to contribute to the economy. So you have a better economy. So I think, this is, you summed it up in the triple bottom line, is a simple way to just try to make our world better through transportation. And so it's in addition to a government requirement that we have to do this plan. I think what we're trying to do is simply just make a better region for all our residents. So look forward to seeing how things develop and how we implement this. Thank you very much, Ms. Abraham.
Sure, soon. Do you mind if I just say a couple of quick things?
Of course, yeah.
Well, Director Guerrero, I appreciate your point. By the way, I know you all know this and you helped drive some numbers up, but our next Youth Leadership Academy cohort is getting together high school students from across the region. What a great question to pose to them, among others, right? I've often thought, we need a free range teens movement here. If our communities can actually work for teenagers, they can work for everybody. So I hear those concerns that you're raising. I think it's an excellent sort of lens to put on this. And I just want to make sure, I know it's often these, especially the information items, we put a lot of information at you and there's not an action to take, but this is either today, right now, or just in the months ahead, the weeks ahead, because the weeks are getting shorter between the end of the year. We're coming back for an adoption on this. And please, Banu, weigh in here. So this is really a time for you. Again, don't say anything if it's still forming a thought on this. You have questions, follow up with us, but we're really looking for your thoughts and your feedback on this, because you will see a framework for adoption coming to you back in February. Am I right about that, Banu?
Yes. And it would be really helpful for us to get any kind of feedback, whether it is whatever it is, so that when we shape that policy framework, we have a clear idea of what we are going after, or what we are trying to. At the end of the plan, when we are completed and adopted the plan, the hope is that we will be able to move the needle in the right direction in all these 3 goals. But for us to do that and to figure out what indicators we should focus on and what metrics we should figure out, it will be very helpful to get the board's comments and feedback on this. And I know I just dumped a lot of information on you right now. If it is helpful, I can come back in December to have a continuation of this conversation.
I think that would be great, but also if I'm assuming if any of the directors, as we process this, Banu, we can send you comments and directly during that time. That'd be all right.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'll definitely ask all our committee members here to process all this, and please get your thoughts over to Banu, and we would definitely welcome a revisit in the December timeframe.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions from our directors, I'm going to go ahead and move to our next informational item. Item 7, our regional growth projections, project update. Mr. Valadroza.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee.
Morning.
Another informational item also relating to the MTPSCS, and I think maybe the key point emphasized up front, we want to get this informational item on your agenda with some more continuity, because it's another one of those early actions you'll be taking on the plan. So as Banu mentioned, the prior item coming back in February of next year for a board action on the framework, setting the goals and the objectives and the framing of the plan. And at the same time frame, we would want to bring forward a staff recommendation on the growth projections, which is really one of those building blocks. So if Banu is maybe her item was that, the larger picture, this is maybe one of the first steps in the plan. I remember Director Saylor articulating this very well in the past of wanting to know when you as the committee and the board will be taking actions, and also recognizing the steps you take in these actions. So this growth projections one is one of those first foundational. And what we mean by the growth projections is our best estimate of where the region will be in terms of jobs and population and housing far into the future, at least 20 or 30 years. It's actually one of the requirements that are put on the plan. And this project is actually at sort of the macro level, or the full SACOG region. Of course, it works very closely within sort of the next part of that building block of then how that growth is distributed amongst all of our communities. So again, I wanted to bring this forward to you with some more continuity, so at least we're building towards that action in February. And of course, doing a long range projection is hard to do in sort of any environment. And lo and behold, in times of uncertainty like we've lived in the past month, it only brings to the forefront the uncertainties we're going to face over that 20 or 30 years of our next long range plan. We do have a good sort of record of doing projections in times of great uncertainty. We have a lot of great resources. So we start with kind of a look back. We go 30 years back, and there's been a good number of disruptions and shocks in that time frame. You think of military base closures, which really affected this region's economy. You think of the dot-com bubble. You think of the Great Recession. So we've been through disruptions before, and so we in a long-term time frame, that's good context. But it's not simply about just looking back; it's also very much looking forward. We have a lot of great tools and resources in that. The two attachments in this item really speak to our expert panel, which we're very thrilled to have. We actually have our second session with them tomorrow, who are really some of the state leaders in thinking about these long-term projections. And again, sort of how you contextualize sort of historical trends, but not necessarily simply extend a trend line. It's about thinking critically about our region's position within the state, within the nation, within the globe. So I'll go through a couple of maybe some just things we've been seeing. And again, it's just to get you thinking. And then I'll close with some schedule. So maybe the point to emphasize in this presentation, just to get in the context, is, of course, how our region, as I mentioned earlier, is affected by those larger trends. And the main one I want to focus on today is population. Population growth throughout the nation has been slowing. I think it's maybe an underreported trend. And in fact, this period 2010 to 2020 is one of the lowest population growths the nation's ever witnessed. It's tied or about the same level as the 30s, which is, of course, is the Great Recession. So population growth is slowing. There's a lot behind that. This is not simply a national thing. It's actually an international thing, an international trend. Population growth is slowing across most of the globe. And basically, there's a lot of demographics behind it, but people are having fewer children, and with fewer children, right, as those cohorts age to the population, it leads to some slower growth. So this is not a doom and gloom scenario, right? The U.S. population growth is slowing, but there's still a lot of positives, and in particular, then we think about our region, there's a lot of positives, and we think about how population growth within our region fits. But of course, it's affected by those larger trends. And so now we are extending our projection into the future. So our prior projection went from 2016 to 2040. We're now thinking, we're no longer in 2016, we're now in 2020, 2021. So we've already moved forward in that projection, and we're extending out that base. So moving into that period of 2040 to 2050 is really when those demographic trends come to a head of a solar population. I wanted to call that attention because I know that it might sound as a disconnect between maybe what you're experiencing in your communities on a day-to-day, but that is the sort of larger macro trend of where the demographers at the Census Bureau all the way down see population growth. And of course, there's assumptions underpinning that, and there's room to talk about how our region competes for that. But that is one of the main findings of population growth, which again I think is a little bit underreported. But in the staff item, there's a pretty complex table, but it really looks at comparing a bunch of projections across the state, federal, and our peer regions across the state when they look at these same trends. And again, going from a 2016 or 20 to 2040 period to a 2020 to 2045 or 2050 period, you see, with a few exceptions, right, that growth sort of slowing down. Again, it's more about sort of getting into the 2040s and 2050s when there's those demographic trends come to a head. So you can imagine that does have an impact ultimately on a projection we'll put forward into 20, 30 years into the future. So I wanted to call attention to that, just because I know, it seemed maybe about a disconnect. You might read some headlines in the newspaper about, population growth. And again, indeed, my team and I, my colleagues and I should say, were in front of you earlier this year in January with the progress report, which again was a bunch of great indicators looking back. And one of the findings we had was Sacramento region is the fastest growing region in the state the last few years on a percentage basis. So great things to point to, but you have to contextualize that growth with recognizing that growth within the broader state of California has really dropped off, and within the nation has dropped off a bit. So all to say, driving towards, we don't have a draft projection for the committee's consideration yet. We plan on coming back next month, but that's going to be a big trend that's going to affect it. Of course, there's other things that we can point to. It's not meant to be a doom and gloom presentation. There's a lot of positive things we can point to too, but I think that's probably, at least in our conversation we've had today with stakeholders, maybe a thing that hasn't been contextualized as well as we probably could have. We also talk about jobs. We actually, our projections, it's the jobs are sort of the driver or the leading element of it, and especially the tradable sector jobs. You heard in Banu's presentation the importance of tradable sectors. We have the prosperity strategy now, which is an important element moving forward. We're still sort of, as a region, in search of that employment growth within tradable sectors. So at least we now have those identified where we think we have strengths, but at least in the last several years, we haven't seen the tradable sector growth that we would have hoped. And then finally, on the household side, related to the jobs and to population, we see, and this is not anything unique to the Sacramento region, some slowing household formation, and that millennials in particular, right, have been kind of hit with the double whammy, the Great Recession and now the great disruption from COVID. And so they've really delayed starting their own households and their own families. So that also has effect on the housing development moving forward. A pretty technical item, obviously. It is something we do ask the board to weigh in with an action, as I mentioned in February, in that it sort of is the overlap of the sort of demographic and economic trends and also the policy. Maybe the point to lead or to close on is we have tended to project that our region will grow faster than the state and the nation, right? But that doesn't just fall in our lap, right? We need to be able to point to, because this is something that we, as part of our plan, as the overview, we need to be able to point to. It needs to be a defendable projection, the policies and the programs that really help support that projection. So again, it's especially in a time of a very fierce sort of competition amongst regions, especially for the labor force. We had our first panel a few weeks ago, and one of the most maybe profound statements is that the competition for a skilled labor force is really going to increase, especially when you get 10, 20, 30 years from now, between regions and between countries. And so we can't just expect a projection to fall into our lap. We need to have those corresponding policies. And indeed, Banu's framework of the EEE is going to be the underpinning for those policies. The board, through prior cycles, have tended to endorse a projection that has a rate faster than the state and the nation because they see those policies in the plan. But just to call attention to, sometimes we think there's a projection, therefore it will be. Of course, that's not the case. There's uncertainty, but there's also reliance on assumptions, which are that there will be those supportive policies. So again, this was just sort of the primer, right? We're working hard. We actually have our expert panel again tomorrow. And then the plan is to come back to you and your colleagues on the other committees in December with a draft projection. It is a draft projection. We understand it's a little bit of a technical exercise, but we'll talk through where we see that top level number out into 2040 or 2050, and then come back and allow stakeholders the opportunity to comment on that, and then come back in February for the board's action, which becomes one of those first building blocks in your ultimate MTP-SCS. So thank you for your attention, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions right now.
Thanks, Garrett. I know we have a question from one of the attendees. I just want to quickly ask, and I realize you're in the middle of it right now, or at least beginning the work. But based on what your comments, do you see or would you predict a large or significant change in the previous projections. In my mind, I still remember, hey, we're going to have over 600,000 new residents by 2040 in this area. Is that, based on your comments earlier, do you see that changing significantly as a speculation?
We're right in the heart of that. So I think, probably you could guess with some of the, material I tried to emphasize with growth slowing, right? And part of it will be too, the board's decision on the horizon year of the plan, if it's a 2045 or 2050. But as you move deeper into that time frame, you do see growth slow. So if you have a plan that has more years in it, maybe the absolute number might not look too different, but the year by year number would, I'd anticipate, look a little smaller.
I see. Okay. Vice Chair Spokely.
Thank you, Chair Soon. Hey, Garrett. I mean, obviously, with these projections, we use historical data to set trend lines, to educate those projections. Given the fact that the state of California declined in population last year, how do you suspect that's going to affect your ability to project, given that we had the fairly significant decline last year, for the first time ever, I think.
Yep, absolutely, and that's part of those sort of broader trends that I tried to speak to at the opening. So, we do think we're a distinct region in the state at large, and so we do think there is a lot of competitive advantages in this region. So we're not the state can grow, and we're about 6% of the state. So a lot of that, what you spoke to, Director Spokely, is I think just the plummeting of growth on the coast. And actually our region and the San Joaquin region are, on a percentage basis, we're much smaller, but on a percentage basis where much of the growth has been happening. So we very much contextualize our growth within what's happening in the nation and within the state, but we are a distinct region. And we think we can compete in our economy and our housing stock, and probably not be as influenced on those larger states, which are really, those larger trends that are really impacted by the coast. At the same time, we talked just briefly about housing, something we're talking about tomorrow with our panel. Housing costs here are obviously less than the coast, but when you compare it to the rest of the nation and when you compare it to our incomes, right, housing is a major issue here, and we need to be able to point to policies in the plan that we are able to say housing, we reverse the sort of decline in affordability, because if we're in an environment where housing is a limiter like it is on the coast, it's very hard to justify a population or jobs projection.
And that was my second point I wanted, or question, I guess, for you, Garrett. You just touched on it. You mentioned the housing projections as well, and millennials, choosing to not buy houses like maybe some of the previous generations would kind of progress as they got older. I think that's largely due to the affordability issue. We have a few dozen millennials that work for me here at my office, and in talking with them, the thought of buying a $600,000 home just doesn't compute. So they're choosing to do other things, renting, what have you, or finding apartments, whatever. I think a large part of how the millennials are reacting is based on the affordability challenge that we have, particularly here in this region, because we're one of the highest housing cost regions in the state, and that's what's, I think, suppressing some of the millennials from moving on to homes.
And we can see that in the data, as well as a lot of the demographic trends suggest that household sizes will be becoming smaller as the population ages, and other demographic trends happen. Actually, we've seen that household sizes have increased in this region in the last 10 years because of Director Spokely spoke to. It's not every millennial, but many probably, and I should say I am a millennial. You read a bunch of this stuff, and I think two key findings is people don't like the boomers, but don't like the millennials even more. Because as a millennial, I should say, hey, it's tough. The double whammy, as I spoke to, the Great Recession, and now with this COVID disruption, they call it the Great Resignation. But very much more people, multi-generational households, and more people what's called doubling up, are having more roommates than would be expected with the demographic trends because of the affordability issues that Director Spokely spoke to. And then just another And again, this is not meant to be the doom and gloom. There's a lot of positive things we'll talk about next time. I don't know if any of you saw the article in the Bee maybe last week, but looking at housing costs just at new construction in our region, they found that our region is the most expensive of any region in the country. We're tied with Miami because they do that important thing, which I think more people need to do, is they pair housing costs with also incomes. And that, you know, the price of a new house in our region is about $650,000. Our income is about 75,000 household, right? And that's really hard math to make work. And so, you know, again, housing is, now we have, like I said, we'll talk more about the positive. Now we have Green Means Go, right? And so we'll be able to point to that in our projections, and we're able to talk to it. But I think the point is, which we'll talk with the panel, is it's been an issue here. It's been a larger issue on the coast. If you look at that table and you look at their projections, right, those are very slow numbers because they've really been having to deal with housing affordability.
Speaking of housing, let's go to our attendees. Chris Norum. Can we let Chris in? There we go.
Good afternoon. I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep.
I don't even know if you can see me, so.
Can't see you though. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me. I just wanted to start by thanking, Garrett for actually reaching out to us, and we provided an economist, Sanjay Varshney, to be part of his process, and a lot of great information. They're doing a lot of deep dives and a lot of good work on that. And SACOG and James have reached out to us, and we're working with them on Green Means Go and a lot of other suggestions for this. But I just wanted to give, a little bit. Chris,
sorry, just can you go ahead and tell everybody who you're with? We
oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I know so many of you. Chris Norum with the North State Building Industry Association. So we represent most of the builders in the region, the vast majority of the builders, large and small, affordable and market rate, as well as 500 member companies. So and tens of thousands of employees. So yeah, again, thanks for all the deep work you're doing on this. I just wanted to maybe give a little bit of information on our side and maybe ask for a little bit of clarification. I just want to note that, Garrett's spot on that the housing prices are going up, and, we have a lot of construction prices that are being affected by the supply chain. And I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone on the call that, we're not happy with having the average price being $600,000 or $700,000. So that's not, we want to be able to make the region affordable, and we're constrained by, a lot of forces. So we're working on a variety of things like that, but I just want to make sure that, when you look at the actual supply cost of construction, it goes up concomitantly with the prices. So I want to make sure that's understood. I also want to just, mention that the average square footage actually has been going down in the last 5 years, and I can provide you guys with more charts on that if you wanted to, but specifically in the presentation, it shows the attached product. And I just wanted to provide maybe some context or get some clarity from staff, because when I look at those numbers for attached product, like in Sac County in 2020, 40% of the product that was produced was actually over 5 units. And so I think that might be a regional number, and I think that so Placer County was like, let me look at here, 16%. Was at that higher density units. And then as a point of contrast, like Riverside County, which has a lot of geographic and demographic similarities to us, there were 8%. So I mean, we have a lot of it's concentrated in the city of Sacramento. I mean, shoot, for a giant number of thousands of units of attached product is being produced in the city. But I want to make sure that it's not to say that we can't do more to generate more attached product, or that we can't do more to create the array of housing choices that people want. But I just want the board to know that that chart, which compares this to a lot of the coastal regions have density issues that we just don't. So I want to make sure that there's just clarity on what the data shows, and make sure that's clearly understood, and see if there's anything else that we can provide in terms of information just to be helpful.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. I don't see any other comments from the attendees. Coming back to our directors, any more comments or questions for Garrett? Okay, again, this is an informational item. Garrett, we're definitely await the outcome of your work. Obviously, these things will affect our arena numbers as well. So look forward to hearing the outcomes there. Okay, moving on to other matters. Do any directors have anything they'd wish to highlight or comment on? Okay, seeing none. There is a noontime micromobility workshop. James, do you want to tee it up for us?
You want to mention that, Christina?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thanks,
Christina, go.
Darren.
Morning, yeah.
Appreciate you mentioning that. So we do have a lunchtime activity for the board today to talk about micromobility, shared mobility. So definitely hope to see some of you all there. I think it'll be very informative and insightful of where we're going and what options are out there to our region. So hopefully we'll see you there. So thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, I wish everyone a great morning and weekend, and meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Safe flight, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.